in the quiet hours of the night. When the world falls still and your thoughts echo loudest, have you ever looked into a mirror and felt like something was looking back? Not your reflection, not just glass, but something else. Something older. Something aware. Welcome back, wanderer of minds. You're watching Mind Scramble, where stories aren't just told, they unfold within you. Tonight, we venture into a tale that is far more than just a narrative. This story peels back the layers of perception, identity, and consciousness itself. This is the story of a mirror, but not just any mirror. An ancient artifact, forgotten in dust and time, that does more than reflect. It remembers, it records, it feeds, and through the eyes of a man who simply wanted quiet in his life. We will descend into a place where reality, memory, and madness overlap like reflections in shattered glass. So settle in, turn down the lights. Let the hum of your own breath guide you into the dark, because once you enter, there is no clean escape from what you're about to see in the mirror that remembers. Eliot had always lived a life of structure. Every morning, his alarm buzzed at exactly 6:10 a.m., followed by 2 cups of black coffee, 3 pieces of toast, always buttered, never jammed, and then a 22-minute walk through the university park, before arriving precisely 8 minutes early for his 9 a.m. philosophy lecture. That was his rhythm, not just habit, but necessity. So when Eliot's watch stopped ticking on a rainy Wednesday morning, a rare deviation from the precise tick-tock cadence of his world, it was not just an inconvenience, it was a disturbance, a splinter in the smooth surface of his mental order. After class, under a sky smeared gray with indecision, he set off into the heart of the old district of the city, a neighborhood where GPS failed and alleys turned like roots of a gnarled tree. He'd heard of a place tucked within a second-hand shop, so old it had no online listing, no social media account, no receipts, no returns. He nearly missed it. Wedged between a shuttered bakery and a boarded-up tailor shop was a sliver of a door, painted deep blue like a bruise. Above it, in faded gold letters, read the words, Curiosities and Relics, EST, 1748. The air changed as he stepped in. It smelled of lacquered wood, tobacco long since burnt, and the forgotten pages of old books. The place was dimly lit, dust drifting through golden beams of light that fell from a single grimy skylight overhead. It wasn't a shop in the modern sense. There was no counter, no cash register, only rows of relics that defied categorization, an ivory comb with a cracked handle, a stack of yellowing postcards from countries that no longer existed, a child's shoe resting atop a rusted candelabra. And then there was the mirror, tucked in the farthest corner, covered partially by a faded velvet cloth. Something about it pulled at him, not like curiosity, but like recognition. The mirror was tall, its frame carved from deep black wood so polished it looked wet. Gothic spires etched into the top curled like thorns. Dust swirled faintly on the glass, but not a single scratch marred its surface. And though the shop was filled with dim light, the mirror seemed to glow faintly, as though reflecting a brighter room. Eliot didn't remember walking toward it. One moment he was staring from across the room. The next, his fingers brushed the carved frame. And then, he saw himself. But not quite. It was his face. Same beard, same glasses, same subtle wrinkle in his forehead. But the expression wasn't his. The reflection looked surprised to see him. Not like someone looking in a mirror. More like someone who had been waiting behind one. Beautiful, isn't it? Came a voice from behind. Eliot turned sharply to see a man emerge from the shadows of a bookcase, thin, with a sharp nose and deeply set gray eyes. His clothes seemed too formal for the century. Dark velvet coat, high collar, shoes that clicked across the wooden floor like a metronome. "You own this place?" Eliot asked. The man didn't answer directly. Instead, He smiled, the kind of smile you'd see in a dream right before waking. It's not for everyone. The mirror, I mean. But it seems to like you. Like me. Elliot raised an eyebrow. The man stepped closer to the mirror, running one pale finger along the edge. It's old. Older than this shop. Older than this city, perhaps. Made in Prague, if I'm to believe the ledger. It's passed through hands both noble and wicked. Some say it was crafted by a man who lost his own reflection to grief. Elliot felt a chill snake up his spine. He wanted to leave. He didn't. Instead, he asked, "How much?" The man tilted his head. "It's not for sale." And then, as Elliot turned to go, the man added softly, "But if it wants you, you'll know." When Elliot looked back, the man was gone. The shop was empty, and the mirror, it now sat wrapped in cloth, in the trunk of Elliot's car. He didn't remember buying it, didn't remember carrying it out, but there it was, just like it had always been meant to follow him home. The mirror stood propped against the wall of Elliot's living room, still cloaked in the faded velvet it had worn in the shop. He didn't remember removing it from his car. He couldn't recall the moment it crossed his threshold. But there it was, resting quietly, as if it had always been part of the decor. The day passed without incident. Elliot tried to work, but his eyes kept drifting toward the cloth-covered object. It pulled at his focus like a magnet, not with urgency, but with inevitability. That night, unable to resist any longer, Elliot approached the mirror. He stood in front of it, hesitating before gently pulling the cloth away. It fell in slow motion, the velvet whispering against the floorboards. The glass greeted him in total silence, a flawless, almost liquid surface. His reflection blinked at him. Only. Something was wrong. It was subtle. At first he blinked. The reflection blinked, but there was a delay. Half a second, maybe less. But definitely there. He lifted his hand slowly. The reflection followed, but for the briefest moment, its fingertips trailed slightly behind. A glitch. Elliot chuckled nervously and leaned in closer. Now face to face, he studied his own eyes in the glass. Something about them seemed darker than usual. Not in color, in feeling. There was no warmth, no recognition. It was like staring at a memory of himself, instead of the real thing. "Too many papers," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I need sleep." But even as he turned to go, something made him freeze. The mirror did not turn with him. His heart stopped. He snapped his head back. The reflection stood still, facing forward, its eyes locked where Elliot had just stood. But Elliot had already taken 2 steps away. A split second later, the reflection jerked to mirror his movement, like a skipped frame catching up. He stared at the mirror again. This time, it was normal. His reflection matched him exactly. Every movement, every breath. "Sleep," he whispered again. This time not as advice, but as a plea. He turned off the lights and left the room, the outline of the mirror still glowing faintly behind him, as if it held on to the light longer than it should have. That night, the dreams came. They weren't nightmares. They were worse. They were memories. Only they weren't his. He stood in a Victorian parlor, the air choked with cigar smoke. A child screamed in the next room, and a man with a bleeding eye stared at him from a chaise lounge. Elliot could smell burning oil and hear a phonograph playing a lullaby he'd never heard before, but somehow knew the words too. When he woke up, his mouth tasted of tobacco and iron. His hands were shaking, and when he walked into the living room, the mirror was facing him. He had left it angled toward the wall. Now, it stood straight, like it had rotated itself in the night. Goosebumps bloomed on his arms. He approached it again, determined to test his own sanity. Waved, blinked, spoke. This time, nothing strange. His reflection matched him flawlessly, but just as he was about to turn away, his reflection smiled. Elliot hadn't. He didn't move a muscle, but in the glass, the corners of his mouth turned upward, and then, The smile vanished, as if it had never happened. He stumbled backward, heart pounding, blood roaring in his ears. It had to be stress, grief. Maybe he was finally cracking under the weight of years spent inside books and silence. But the truth, the raw, terrifying truth, was far simpler. The mirror was watching, and something on the other side was learning how to mimic him. Asterisk. Elliot had always believed dreams were the brain's natural recycling process. Random data flushed from memory, emotions, processed and packed away, nothing more. But by the third night after bringing the mirror home, that belief had shattered. He wasn't dreaming like before. He wasn't a dreamer anymore. He was inside someone else's story. The first dream started in sepia. Everything was tinted in the faded brown of old photographs. Elliot stood at the center of a cobbled street, fog drifting across the ground like steam. The houses lining the road were narrow and crooked, their rooftops leaning like bent old men, whispering secrets to one another. Children played in silence, no laughter, no shouts, just movement, like a silent film. He walked past a bakery with no name. Inside, a woman stared out at him, her eyes hollow, her apron stained red. She mouthed something. He pressed his ear to the glass. "You shouldn't have looked in." And then a man ran past, not at him, but away, screaming, his face twisted in terror. Behind him, crawling out of the shadows, was a mirror, not upright, but moving, bending, dragging itself with spider-like limbs made of wood and broken reflections. Elliot turned to flee, but the street stretched infinite, like a hallway made of stitched memories. He collapsed to the ground, but when he looked down, his hands were no longer his own. They were smaller, younger, covered in ink and burn scars. He woke up screaming, his bedsheets drenched, his throat raw. The mirror stood in its corner, still unchanged, but Elliot could swear it looked cleaner, polished, as if it had absorbed something during the night. And that wasn't all. He smelled smoke. Not in the room, but on himself. His shirt stank of coal. His hands were stained dark. His nails carried soot under them. He'd gone to sleep clean by the end of that week. The dreams had intensified. Each night, a new life. Each more disturbing than the last. A woman drowning in a stone well while chanting a nursery rhyme in German. A soldier bleeding out in a bunker while whispering his lover's name. A name Elliot had never heard before, but woke up crying for. A midwife in 1910 pulling a stillborn from a screaming girl, only to look in the window and see her own face, staring back, watching. The worst part, they felt real, not cinematic, not abstract. He smelled the blood, tasted the dust, felt the heartbreak, the guilt, the fury of people he had never met. But as the week dragged on, a deeper horror emerged. He wasn't just experiencing these dreams. He was remembering them during the day. Out of nowhere, he could recite poetry in a dialect he didn't know. He began humming lullabies from the 1800s. Once he corrected a student on a Russian phrase, in fluent Russian. He'd never studied the language. Elliot began to lose track of himself. He kept a journal, or tried to, but the handwriting changed. Every entry, sometimes delicate cursive, sometimes all caps block letters with looping GS. Once, it was entirely in French, another Greek. He looked back at old pages and couldn't recognize his own thoughts. He would write a sentence like, "I saw her again tonight. The red ribbons, the same smell of peaches. She always cries before she burns." But he wouldn't remember what it meant, who she was, or why the page had scorch marks around the edge. And then the whispers began. Not in the mirror, not in his dreams, in real life. He'd be making coffee and hear a soft voice behind him whisper, "Don't look when it moves." In the hallway, "They buried me before I finished my sentence." In his own voice, "You are not the original." He stopped answering his phone, stopped going to lectures, stopped shaving. The house grew darker, more claustrophobic. But the dreams never stopped. He once dreamed of being a painter, locked in a tower, painting the same face over and over again. A girl with no eyes. Just endless black orbs where her pupils should be. He woke up with charcoal on his fingers and smudged portraits on his walls. He hadn't drawn anything in years. One night, it escalated. He found himself in the dream as himself. Not in a stranger's life. Not as a ghost. He stood in his own living room, but older, dustier. The furniture was wrong, too antique. His house was from another era. In the dream, he walked toward the mirror and looked in, and in the glass, he saw 1,000 eyes staring back. Not his face, but a crowd pressed up against the other side of the glass. Men, women, children, old and young, eyes wide, mute, screaming silently, all of them trapped. Some pressed their palms against the inside of the glass, banging. One woman clawed at it, leaving bloody streaks, and in the very center, he saw himself. Not as he was, not the Elliot of now, but a version of him burned, black, ashy, with glowing eyes and a smile that was too wide, too inhuman. This version raised a hand slowly and pressed a single finger to the glass. "Wake up," it mouthed. He jolted upright, but he wasn't in bed. He was standing in front of the mirror at 3:07 a.m., barefoot, in the dark, eyes open the entire time. His hand was pressed against the mirror surface, in the exact spot the version of him in the dream had touched, and when he pulled it away, there was a faint handprint burned into the glass. It vanished seconds later, but it had been there. He wasn't dreaming anymore. The mirror was bringing the dreams into reality, and it was feeding off him. Elliot had stopped trusting mirrors. He covered every reflective surface in the house, from bathroom sinks to kitchen appliances, draping them in bedsheets and newspapers. Anything to avoid catching a glimpse of something he couldn't explain. But no matter how hard he tried to escape it, the main mirror, that mirror remained untouched. Not by will, by force. Every time he tried to move it, it resisted. Not physically, it wasn't heavy, but something about touching it filled him with nausea. Like his own skin rejected contact with the thing. He'd once grabbed a towel and flung it over the glass. The next morning, it was folded neatly on the couch, and the mirror stood exposed. Not even gravity disobeyed the rules this casually. Something else was at play, something far more intelligent than glass. The phenomenon began with flickers. He'd catch the mirror out of the corner of his eye, a twitch, a blink, a movement he didn't make. Once, while brushing his teeth near the hallway, he glimpsed himself in the distant mirror. Only his reflection was standing still, staring, while his real self was in motion. But it escalated quickly. One afternoon, in a rare moment of clarity, Elliot sat across from the mirror and decided to confront it. He pulled up a chair, notebook in hand, and began logging what he saw. Minute 1, mirror, normal. Minute 2, subtle lag in reflection. Delay, about 0.2 seconds. Minute 3, reflection scratches, left cheek. Real self does not. He froze. He watched. The reflection scratched again. Same cheek, same angle. Elliot reached up. His cheek was itchy. Planted thought, or suggestion. He jotted it down. Minute 4. Reflection stops moving. Eyes remain locked on me. Breathing irregular. Minute 5. I smile. Reflection frowns. His hands trembled. Then something happened that snapped his journal in half. Minute 6. Reflection. Mouths a word. Unknown. Possibly DA or Dov. Minute 6.3. Reflection repeats this time. Audible. Elliot's blood ran cold. It was faint like a voice leaking through thin walls, but the sound came from inside the glass. Dauphin. The word meant nothing to him, but his reflection had spoken it. He played it over and over in his head. Dauphin, French, historical, religious. He Googled it immediately. Dauphin, title given to the heir apparent to the throne of France before the Revolution. Odd. Why would his reflection say that? He scrolled further and stopped. Louis Charles, the final Dauphin of France, reportedly died in prison at the age of 10. After months of isolation, starvation, and delusion. Some claimed he conversed with mirrors. A tremor ran through his spine like a blade of ice. It only got worse from there. Over the following nights, the reflection grew more independent. Elliot would sit still. The reflection would crack its knuckles. Elliot would yawn. The reflection rolled its eyes. And once, just once, it whispered, "You are the copy." He leaped back so hard, he knocked over the chair. The mirror remained perfectly still, calm his own face. But wearing someone else's expression, he spoke aloud. "What are you?" The reflection stared then. Slowly, it mouthed the sentence. He leaned in. His heart thumped with dread, and then the reflection mouthed, "You are the memory, Elliot, not the mind. I am the witness. You dream what I let you see." The words burned into him, not spoken, but injected like a needle sliding into his brain. His thoughts began to fracture. He'd start sentences and finish them in languages he didn't know. He'd feel hunger for food he'd never eaten. He'd write letters addressed to Catherine, apologizing for the fire. One day, he passed by the mirror casually, and the reflection didn't show him. Instead, it showed a different man, older, wearing an overcoat from the 1800s, standing in an identical room, but filled with candlelight instead of lamps. The man looked up from a book, eyes meeting Elliot's. He mouthed, "You're next." And then the mirror flickered like a dying bulb and returned to normal. Elliot fell to his knees. He was being haunted, not by ghosts, but by layers of memory woven into the mirror like veins in marble. One night, unable to bear it, Elliot spoke back. He stared at the mirror for hours, waiting for it to speak. And when the reflection blinked out of sync, when the moment came, he said, "Why me?" The reflection paused. Then, slowly, it raised its finger, pointing at Elliot, and whispered something he didn't expect. "Because you were empty." That broke him. He screamed. Threw a lamp at the mirror. It shattered the lamp. But the glass didn't crack. Instead, the mirror began to vibrate, like a tuning fork. From its depths came a sound, low and guttural. Hundreds of whispers, layered into one. He clutched his ears, falling to the ground. The sound wasn't loud, but it bypassed his ears. It screamed inside his skull, and through the static came one final sentence. "You asked. Now you'll remember." That night, he blacked out, and woke up with writing all over his arms. Not tattoos, not markers, carved, words, etched with something sharp, in languages he couldn't read. He stood before the mirror. The reflection wore a suit, and it was smiling. Elliot sat in his kitchen. The lights dimmed. Silence draped over him like a heavy, wet blanket. It had been 11 days since the mirror came home. 11 days since his reflection stopped obeying. 11 days since he felt like himself. He hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 of those days. Not because he didn't want to, but because his voice wasn't always his anymore. It began with a phone call. His sister, Laura, the only family he still spoke to, called out of concern. She hadn't heard from him. He'd missed the family gathering. No texts. No calls. Elliot picked up the phone with trembling hands, heart pounding. "Elliot," she said gently. He opened his mouth to respond. But what came out was, "Je ne suis pas Elliot." Laura paused. "What?" He coughed. Tried again. I'm here. He cleared his throat. Sometimes the echoes are louder than the speaker. His eyes widened. That wasn't what he meant to say. "Are you okay?" she asked, now clearly concerned. Elliot forced his mouth shut. His own thoughts were being interrupted, hijacked. He pressed the phone against his chest, panting, whispering, Stop it. Stop speaking through me. The mirror, visible just barely from where he sat, shimmered. A faint whisper drifted across the air. You opened the door. From that day forward, it became routine. He'd be muttering to himself, "Gotta check the mail," and instead, his voice would say, "The boy is still in the well." His bones cry out. He'd try to order food over the phone. He'd speak the address and hear himself say, "The fire took more than names. It took time." He didn't know the words, didn't recognize the tone. Sometimes, the voice wasn't even male, high-pitched, raspy, elderly, childlike, foreign, cold, broken. It wasn't Elliot speaking. It was a chorus, slipping through his mouth like water through a cracked pipe. Worst was the classroom incident. Against better judgment, Elliot had attempted to teach one last lecture. He needed normalcy, structure, grounding. His students sat in a circle, books in hand, as he opened the discussion on memory and the construct of identity. Fitting. He barely made it past the introduction. "We define ourselves," he said, "not by action alone, but by the recollection of that action." And then his body froze, his eyes glazed over, and out of his mouth came a voice, high and tremulous with a French accent. "They buried me in the rain, still breathing." She said it was mercy, but the roots know. The students stared, confused. One girl raised her hand slowly. Professor." Elliot blinked. Awareness returned. He had no memory of what he'd just said. Panic struck him. He muttered something about vertigo and rushed out of the room. That was the last class he would ever teach. The next evening, the whispers evolved into full-blown conversations. He caught himself talking to no one, mid-sentence. Once, he paced the living room for over 20 minutes, holding a one-sided argument with a voice only he could hear. The scary part, he wasn't the one talking, not consciously. His mouth moved, but the thoughts didn't originate from him. The mirror watched the whole time. One night, Elliot set up his camera, tried to record himself sleeping, muttering, anything. He reviewed the footage. At 2:44 a.m., his body sat up in bed. He spoke clearly, fluidly. It was 1822 when the first one was taken. "That child did not dream again. You hold her dreams now." Another voice, deeper, responded from inside the mirror. "He suspects nothing, but the boundaries are thinning." Elliot gasped, paused the footage, rewound, played it again. Louder, no distortion, no hallucination, two-way conversation. His voice, and something else, something using him as a conduit. He started writing compulsively. It wasn't journaling anymore. It was channeling. By candlelight, the only light he trusted now. He'd fill notebook after notebook with entire monologues in languages he didn't speak. One entire book, minus 240 pages, was written in what looked like Middle Dutch. He took samples to a linguistics professor anonymously. The reply: "This is a confessional poem from 1450. Some of the metaphors are extremely dark references to self-burial, fire worship, and eternal mirrors." The professor asked who wrote it. Elliot never responded. He threw the notebook in the fireplace. It didn't burn. The voices began reacting to his emotions. If he cried, they mocked him. If he laughed, they mimicked it in an uncanny, delayed way. If he grew angry, truly furious, they retaliated. One day he screamed at the mirror, "You're not real. You're echoes. You're dead." And the mirror cracked, not visibly, but inside the glass. He saw something shift. Dozens, maybe hundreds of blurry silhouettes recoiled as if struck. Then one stepped forward, a child, no older than 6, eyes pitch black, mouth stitched shut. The voice came through Elliot's mouth again, but this time, it was hollow, deep. "You wear borrowed skin." By now, Elliot had fully accepted what was happening. He was not alone in his body. He was a host, a bridge between realities. And the more he resisted, the louder they became. Not all the voices were malevolent. Some wept, some begged for release. One asked for its cat, Lucy. Where is Lucy? She was white and soft and always afraid of thunder. But the voices weren't just inside him anymore. One day, his neighbor knocked on the door. A polite man, retired, friendly. He said, "You all right in there, Elliot? I heard voices last night. Arguing sounded like a whole family." Elliot swallowed hard. "I live alone." The man chuckled nervously. "Well, must be the pipes echoing, huh?" Elliot didn't respond, because, he knew, the voices weren't in his apartment. They were inside him, and the mirror was simply the portal that let them in. Asterisk, there are memories Elliot distinctly recalls: his 12th birthday at the lake, his first bike ride down Ridgeview Hill, his mother burning toast on winter mornings while singing 80s pop. And yet, when he touched the mirror, those memories changed. Not dramatically at first, just subtle things. The lake was frozen, not blue. The bike wasn't red, it was white, with rusted handlebars. And his mother, she wasn't singing at all. She was sobbing. The first memory that truly broke him appeared during sleep. It came as a dream, one more vivid than any he'd had before. In the dream, Elliot stood in a school hallway lined with old oak lockers and yellowed photos. He was 10 years old, wearing suspenders and holding a brass bell. A teacher with no eyes leaned over and whispered, "Ring it twice if you still remember your sister's drowning." Elliot woke screaming. He never had a sister, but the mirror disagreed the next morning. Elliot noticed something in its reflection, his room, but with a framed photo on the nightstand that wasn't really there. He turned. Nothing. He looked back into the mirror. The photo remained, showing Elliot as a boy, standing beside a girl in a floral dress. The label read, "Elliot and Marin, -1993, but..." Elliot was born in 1990, and never knew a Marin. That night, he opened a box of old photos his mother had given him years ago, untouched until now. There, at the very bottom, was the same photo. Frayed edges. No label. He flipped it over. A message in faint pencil. "You forgot." She didn't. The next week spiraled into a kaleidoscope of confusion. The mirror didn't just show memories. It reconstructed them. It corrected his history. One evening, Elliot watched his reflection silently rearrange his books. Not physically. In reality, they sat still. But in the mirror, there were different titles. "A Manual for Drowning the Year Without Sky Things," Marin said. He blinked. The books reverted. He opened the third book. It didn't exist. Still, the phrase haunted him. His dreams turned increasingly archival. One night, he walked through a foggy library. No walls, just infinite shelves. On one was a file with his name, Elliot V. Rains, Parallel Stream 3C. He opened it. Inside were memories he'd never lived. A drowning in a public fountain. An asylum called Mossfield Repose. A carved mirror handed to a child in 1904. Each page ended with the same stamped phrase, "Return to sender sometimes." The mirror inserted memories into his present. He'd find objects in his apartment. He didn't remember buying a rusted harmonica, a child's drawing of two stick figures beside a well, a jar labeled Thursday Rainwater. He once tried to throw one of these things away, a silver spoon etched with the words, "To my son, never forget her name." He tossed it in the trash, locked the bin, and went to bed. The next morning, it was back on his pillow. Then came the most disturbing event. Elliot tried to record a diary entry, attempting to log what he believed was real. Two separate facts from Mira. He sat in front of his camera and said, "My name is Elliot Rains. I was born in 1990 in Cedar Hollow. I have no siblings. I am a professor of identity and consciousness. I've never been married. I am currently 35. He watched the playback. The video showed him speaking entirely different words. "My name is Elliot Caraway, born 1888. My sister Marin died in the wishing well behind our family chapel. I was blamed for her drowning. I have carried 47 memories that are not mine, and the mirror won't stop feeding me. He deleted the video in horror. Or tried to dot it. Wouldn't delete. The delete button grayed out. The file name changed on its own. Truth 01. The next day, there were 7 more files labeled Truth 02 through Truth 08. He hadn't recorded anything else. Elliot tried a radical step, visiting his childhood home. Long since abandoned, he needed to confirm what was real. He drove 4 hours, trembling the entire way. The house stood still, unchanged, but the backyard. There was a well, overgrown with moss, surrounded by thorny bushes. Exactly as he saw in the mirror. He approached it slowly. A single ribbon fluttered from a branch above it, blue and white polka dots like the one Marin wore in the photo. He leaned over the well at the bottom, reflecting up at him in the water. He didn't see his face. He saw hers, Marin eyes wide, mouth moving silently. He heard nothing, until his voice whispered, "You forgot her scream." Elliot stumbled back, fell, and hit his head. When he awoke hours later, the ribbon was tied to his wrist. He returned home, broken. He stood before the mirror, defeated, and asked, "What else have I forgotten?" The mirror didn't speak, but in the glass, hundreds of overlapping versions of himself stared back. Some older, some children, some rotting. One version spoke, "We didn't forget. We were made to forget, and now the remembering begins." Elliot's apartment began filling with objects from other lives. A child's raincoat size 6T, a woman's locket with his reflection inside a newspaper, clipping from 1897, boy witnesses. Sister's disappearance into unseen water, a mirror shard etched with his full name, in a Victorian font. He didn't collect them. They just appeared, as if his life was reconstructing itself, not according to his memory, but according to the mirrors. Each time he looked into its surface now, he didn't see the present. He saw scenes from other timelines, a version of himself living in a mental asylum, drawing hundreds of mirrors. Another in a forest cabin, screaming at a mirror he had nailed shut. One in a wedding suit, standing alone at the altar. The mirror beside him wearing a veil. The mirror no longer waited for him to dream. It dreamed for him. It began with voices. At first, just one, echoing faintly in Elliot's apartment. Impossible to locate. Always on the edge of hearing. "You're not supposed to be here." It wasn't his voice. Not exactly, but something eerily familiar. Then came the second voice, louder, firmer, fractured with panic. "He's waking up again. Seal the mirror. Seal it." Elliot froze, heart pounding. He turned off every electronic device in the house, sat in complete silence. The voices didn't stop. They got clearer then. The knock came. 3 soft taps on the mirror's surface. And from the reflection, a man stepped forward, wearing Elliot's face, but not Elliot. This version of him was gaunt, hollow-eyed, bloodshot. He had deep scarring on his left temple and a strange insignia tattooed on his wrist, a mirror fracturing into branches. The doppelganger didn't blink, didn't speak. He placed a hand on the mirror's inside surface and mouthed words, "It's not just me." Then, behind him, dozens of other Elliots emerged in the reflection, each different. One had no mouth. One was bald, dressed in asylum rags. One was wearing a priest's robe, clutching a bloodied crucifix. One had mirror shards embedded in his cheeks. One was weeping uncontrollably, holding a photo of Marin. Elliot screamed and threw a blanket over the mirror, but the voices didn't stop. Over the next 48 hours, Elliot spiraled. The apartment changed again, subtly at first. His reflection in the bathroom mirror didn't move with him. His shadow had an extra limb briefly, just long enough for him to notice. Photos in his gallery began glitching. One showed 3 Elliots, seated in a triangle, all looking at the camera. He isolated himself. No phone, no internet, no contact. But the mirror didn't require connection. The mirror was connection. He began seeing messages, left by versions of himself, scrawled into condensation on his bathroom mirror. If you're reading this, you've already lost your body. Save your mind. Etched on his front door's inside wood panel. Do not trust the Elliot with the missing tooth. Written on his bedroom ceiling, in a handwriting eerily like his own. We are fragments of the same scream. And then, the bleeding began. Not his own. The mirror began to leak. First it was black, tar-like fluid oozing from the edges. Then red, thick, coagulated. He cleaned it. It returned. He once left the house for a day, drove into the forest to escape. When he returned, the mirror was shattered. Each shard reflected a different timeline. He picked one up and saw himself dying, stabbed by a woman with blue eyes screaming. You were supposed to remember her. Another shard showed him laughing on a stage, another in a coffin. One shard, the worst of all, reflected nothing. Soon after, they began appearing physically, not just in the mirror, not just as hallucinations, real footsteps. Real objects moved, real conversations. He came home one night to find an exact double of himself standing in the kitchen, sipping tea. The double nodded. Don't freak out. I'm 7C. You're 1A. We're merging. Elliot backed away. Merging. 7C smirked. Yeah. Big events close. All of us aligning. He sipped tea again and added, Don't trust 5F. He lies. Always lies. Then he vanished into steam. That night, Elliot had a dream where he stood at a conference table, surrounded by 14 versions of himself, each labeled with a number letter. Code, 1A himself to be burned, face 3D laughs constantly for F wearing goggles, 5F silent, expressionless, 6E weeping, 7CT, drinker 8Z, completely bald. Pupil S eyes 9L, wearing a bloodied apron 10Q, writing symbols in air 11H child version. 12K, with a mirror mask 13 volts rotting. Worm-infested 1 for X on fire, but not burning in the dream. They voted on something. Only 5F abstained. When Elliot asked what they were deciding, 7C whispered, Which one of us gets to stay? He awoke, drenched in sweat. On his mirror was a list, written in marker. List of terminated variants. 3D, eliminated in sleep. 9L, corrupted by memory. Loop 11H, lost inside time dilation. 13 volts, rejected by body 1. 4X, incompatible with reality. Next to his own code, 1A, was a blinking symbol. Pending. Elliot stopped sleeping. He didn't trust what would emerge if he let go. He tried smashing every mirror in his house. The next morning, they were all back, pristine. He covered them in black paint. They peeled themselves clean overnight. He moved into a motel. There was a mirror behind the television, no matter where he went. They followed, not just physically, in his mind. He began hearing their thoughts, feeling their regrets, living their deaths. One variant, 12K, took over his body for 4 hours. Elliot watched from inside his own skull as the variant packed a bag marked the apartment walls with ancient glyphs. Drank ink, whispered something into the mirror. We have a breach. Prime is remembering. Then he snapped back into control, screaming, vomiting ink, his hands shaking. The merging intensified. Time blurred. On July 10th, Elliot lived an entire year in one afternoon. Memories of a war he never fought in. A marriage to a woman named Kira. A child that died at birth. An arrest for mere possession. A trial by flame. When he blinked, it was still July 10. But now he remembered that entire life, and felt the grief of it like it was real, because it was in another version. At one point, Elliot wrote a letter to himself, to whichever version survives. Please bury us somewhere cold. Somewhere the mirror can't find us again. He didn't remember writing it, but it was in his handwriting. Signed, Elliot Rains Variant 0. There had never been a 0 before. Now, every time he looks into the mirror, he doesn't see his face. He sees a rotation. Each second, a new version of him appears. Some smile, some scream, some bleed, some mouth a warning, some cry, some plead, and one, always the same at the end, just says, "I let Marin drown." And then, black asterisk. It started small, like a skipped heartbeat, a glitch. In a familiar song. Elliot stood in his kitchen, sipping coffee, when a child's laughter echoed through the apartment. But he lived alone, and had no memory of ever having children. He turned to see a toy, a small plastic spinning top, rolling lazily across the floor. He blinked. It was gone. But the coffee in his hand was now ice cold, and it wasn't the same mug. That day, he lost 30 minutes. One moment he was brushing his teeth. Next, he was on a park bench, barefoot, trembling, holding a wedding ring in his palm. He had never been married. The mirror began acting erratically. It no longer reflected what was. Now, instead, it became a looping archive, displaying versions of Elliot from different points in time. A teenager, skateboarding down a suburban street. A middle-aged man, crying at a funeral. A gray-bearded recluse, carving symbols into a cave wall. A prisoner, in an orange jumpsuit, mouthing numbers over and over. And then, a version of Elliot with no eyes, whispering, "This already happened. You already broke it. Stop trying." Elliot began keeping a journal. Every morning, he woke up to pages filled, written in his handwriting, but detailing events he had no memory of. "Do not open the closet after 2:15 a.m. Kira called again. She says the child doesn't remember drowning. Today, the house was made of mirrors. I couldn't find a single wall. We saw our own birth through the mirror. It screamed. Every entry ended the same way. I am not Elliot anymore. I am the sum of those who were." Time fractures became physical. Elliot would walk through his living room and enter a classroom. Turn around, it's gone. He stepped into his shower one morning and was suddenly on a battlefield. Boots soaked in blood, a rifle in hand, deafened by explosions. He screamed. The water turned red when he stumbled out. His apartment was back, except every surface had a date carved into it. October 17th, 2042. That date kept appearing in dreams, in mail that didn't exist, on the inside of his eyelids when he blinked. One morning, Elliot awoke with a deep scar on his left arm, fresh, painful, no memory of how it got there. That night, he watched himself receive it in the mirror, a future version, older, surrounded by fire, sliced the skin open with a shard of glass and screamed, "We need to remember." Marin was the first key. He collapsed in the reflection. The wound faded, but the scar remained. He tried calling his mother. The voice that answered was his own, but 20 years younger. "Mom's not here. She drowned last year. Same day you." Forgot how to cry. He hung up. He called again. This time it was an old woman. "Elliot. Oh, I buried you years ago, sweetheart. You sound so alive." The clocks rebelled. All of them, wall clocks, wristwatches, digital readouts began, displaying different times. Not random, but eerily specific moments from his life. 3:12 a.m., when Miran vanished. 11:08 p.m., when the first mirror cracked. 6:44 p.m., when he first noticed his reflection smiling without him. 12 o'clock midnight, every day, the same phrase whispered from every ticking object. "We begin again." He stopped trusting time entirely. There were days when he was 5 years old, again barefoot, watching his mother cook, knowing she would soon be dead, but unable to speak. Then he'd blink, and be 90, struggling to breathe in a hospital bed, whispering not yet, not again. One time, he lived an entire childhood, only to wake up in his bed with blood on his pillow, and a note in his hand. That one was a test run. You failed again. He tried to write a linear history, a timeline, but every time he thought he had it, the mirror changed it. He would jot down, age 10, saw first mirror shift. Age 15, Marin disappears. Age 21, found the first glyph. Then the page would rearrange itself. Now it read, age 10, drowned. Age 15, met variant 6E. Age 21, time collapsed inward. Marin was never real. He would blink, and Marin's photos were missing. He found a tape recorder on his bedside table, pressed play. His own voice spoke. Okay, today is March 4th, 2022. If you're hearing this, I've looped at least 17 times. You need to find the zero mirror. Only that one doesn't lie. It's the one that doesn't reflect anything at all. Break it, and you might reset. The recording ended. He checked the date. It was October 17th, 2042. One night, he saw the mirror ripple like water from it. A hand emerged, his holding a necklace. The necklace had a small photo locket dot inside, a picture of him and Marin, standing in front of a lighthouse. He'd never been to a lighthouse in his life. He whispered, "Where is this from?" The reflection responded, "From the version of you that never broke the mirror, the one who remembered in time." The hand dropped the necklace. It fell through the mirror, landing at his feet, real, cold. Time is no longer linear for Elliot. It is a web, sticky, infinite, overlapping. He sees himself dying in thousands of ways. He sees futures where he's president, a monk, a murderer, a ghost, a father, a god. He remembers conversations that haven't happened yet. He meets people who say they've already met him. He lives the same day in different styles, once as a dream, once as a nightmare, once in reverse, once without any sound, once where he is everyone else. In one version of the day, he meets a woman with violet eyes. She says, "You asked to forget." The mirror obeyed, but now the cracks are bleeding through. "You will remember all of it." He asks her name. She touches his forehead and says, "I'm what you loved most," and let go. When he wakes, he's holding a ring again, but this time, it has her name etched inside, Marin. He doesn't know what day it is anymore, because every day is all days. He writes one final entry in his journal. Time has elapsed. I am every Elliot that ever was, every failure, every breakthrough, every scream, every silence. There is no sequence now, only mirrors, and the echo of what I tried to forget. Elliot, or whoever I used to be. There was always a design, not an accident, not a coincidence. The mirror was never just an object, it was a door and a prison, and Elliot was not its victim, he was its keeper. It began with a name he didn't recognize, Dr. Helene Voss. He found the name scrawled into the mirror's corner, so small it could only be seen under steam. When he whispered it aloud, something shifted behind the glass. He Googled her. Nothing, but then the mirror showed him an old newspaper. The kind printed in black and white, yellowed with age. Dr. Helene Voss leads controversial consciousness. Experiment at Ashgrove Institute claims ability to isolate identity threads through reflective temporal decay. Date: October 17th, 1942. The same date. Again, he found the Ashgrove Institute, or what was left of it, an abandoned asylum, buried beneath decades of moss and memory. About 200 miles from where he lived. Drawn by a force beyond logic, he drove there. What he found would unravel everything. The institute was a tomb. Empty beds, rusting machines, peeling paint over warnings that read, "Do not reflect, they see you back," mirrors. Lie. He found a locked room, observation chamber B, and inside, a single surviving tape. He played it on a portable, reel-to-reel. He found under the dust, a woman's voice, precise, scientific, emotionless. Day 206. Subject: 5. demonstrates stable retention of prior lives through reflective exposure. The mirror accelerates synaptic bridging between temporal selves. However, dissociative collapse is increasing. Subject 7 entered phase 6 today. He spoke in 12 voices. Each one claimed to be the real self. The mirror does not show what is, but what was, and might still be. The subject called me Moran today. That name again. But I was never Moran. Elliot's readings are off the charts. His breath caught. Elliot. His name, spoken by a woman who had supposedly died before he was born. He dug deeper. In the basement, he found a sealed vault marked, "The Mirror Experiment. Do not open without 2 observers present." He opened it anyway. Inside, a journal, a cracked photo of Dr. Helene Voss, and the original mirror. Exactly like the one in his apartment, but older and humming. The journal was hers. Inside, he read, "The mirror was never meant for the public. It is a neural bridge, a psychic conduit that allows fragmented identities across timelines to observe, influence, and eventually merge. The subject must be unaware, at first. The integration depends on gradual exposure. If they realize too soon, madness." Elliot is a rare thread, one whose timeline fractures naturally. Every iteration of him across reality echoes trauma. He is the ideal candidate, because he forgets, and forgets, and forgets. We built it for him. The truth landed like a landslide. The mirror didn't come to him by accident. It was placed there. His apartment, his life, a construct, a carefully engineered simulation to contain him until the merging process was complete. But then, something happened. The final pages of the journal were rushed, messy, filled with fear. One of the Elliot variants broke through too early. He became aware. He warned the others. The mirror is now fractured. They are speaking to each other now, not just through the glass, but outside it. One version of him is trying to stop us. One version loves Marin. One version remembers what the mirror is for, a prison for the variant that broke the loop. We were wrong to build it. We made a god by accident. He dropped the journal. The mirror behind him lit up, blazing white, and every reflection was now a different Elliot, all staring back. Some were crying. Some were bleeding. One was on fire. One was smiling with teeth made of glass, and one, the oldest, stepped forward, looked him dead in the eyes and said, "They needed a way to cage me. I was too powerful, too unstable. So they created you. You are not the original, Elliot. You are the warden, and I'm almost out." Suddenly, the mirror cracked, a sound like thunder in reverse. The room shook. Voices screamed from the walls, and the photo of Dr. Voss burned without flame. He ran. The institute began collapsing in on itself, not physically, but in time. He saw flashes a young girl screaming Marin as she was pulled into the mirror. Dr. Voss injecting something into his childhood self. 2 Elliots shaking hands, one dissolving. A version of him building the mirror with ancient tools and bleeding eyes. Each time, the phrase echoed. October 17th, the day the loop breaks. The day Elliot dies, or all of them live forever. He returned to his apartment. Only now, the apartment was an exact replica of the Ashgrove Institute, except the mirror was gone. Only a frame remained. He stood in front of it. Suddenly, his reflection returned, not copying him, but speaking independently. "You now know why it was built. You now know who you are. The question is, will you continue the cycle, or end it?" Elliot asked, the one question that haunted him most. Was Marin ever real? The reflection smiled sadly. Marin was your tether, the last human part of you. You loved her more than the mirror. That's why they took her. He fell to his knees. Everything had been a lie, except the pain, except the mirrors. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. No city noise, no power hum, no breath, but his time had frozen, or fled. Only Elliot remained, and the mirror frame, it no longer showed reflections. It didn't shimmer. It didn't whisper. It waited. He approached, cautiously, like stepping toward an altar or a coffin. His fingers trembled as he reached toward it. Then the air folded, literally, like paper collapsing inward on itself. From nowhere and everywhere, a voice emerged, but it wasn't from the mirror, it was from inside his own skull. "You ready?" He turned, but he was alone. Then he realized he wasn't being spoken to. He was being remembered by every other Elliot. Suddenly, the room blurred. He wasn't in the apartment anymore. He was in the loop room, the metaphysical construct, hidden between timelines. 15 mirrors stood in a circle. Each one showed a different Elliot. A version who was a murderer, one who saved lives, a child, a soldier, a monk, a hacker. A version that wasn't human anymore, one that lived in 1942, one that aged backward, one who still believed Marin was real, a version made entirely of mirror shards, one that controlled time, one who destroyed all reflections, one who never forgot, one who started all this. Each reflection turned toward him. "You were the warden, Elliot." They spoke in unison. "You kept a mirror from breaking. But now, we offer you the choice. Merge us and become what you were always meant to be." A pedestal rose from the center of the room. On it, a shard, the original core of the mirror. The one piece not bound by time. If he touched it, he would fuse with all the other ELLIOTS. All knowledge, all memories, all pain, all power. And he would no longer be one version. He would be the convergence. But then, another voice, a softer one, a voice that didn't echo in power, but in love. "Don't." He turned and saw her. MAREN, alive. Real, wearing the same green dress she wore the day she disappeared. Tears streaked her cheeks. "If you take the shard, you lose what's left of you. They'll use you to complete the loop. The mirror wins." He stepped back from the shard. The other Elliots grew hostile. "She's not real. She's the failsafe. She's the program keeping you soft. She was never yours, just a variable." Marin reached out. "You remember me? The lake. The way you laughed when I slipped. You remember love. That means you're still human. And humans can choose." The room trembled. He had seconds. Choose the shard, become a godlike convergence, or destroy it, and with it, every version of him, including himself. He looked at Marin. He looked at the shard. He looked at the reflections pleading, weeping, some threatening. And he chose. Elliot stepped forward, took the shard in his hands. Every version of him screamed. The mirrors cracked. Time bled. Then he turned toward Marin and handed her the shard. "I remember everything, and I still choose you." She smiled through the tears, took the shard, and smashed it on the floor. A sound louder than reality itself. Like the sky crying, like mirrors dying, and then, light. Not just white light, but truth light, rewriting, healing, revealing. Each mirror dissolved. Each version of Elliot faded. Smiling free, he collapsed, and Marin held him. Epilogue. He woke up in a hospital, real human, one timeline. Marin was by his side, asleep in the chair. No mirrors, only windows, only him, only one. The mirror had been destroyed across all timelines, and Elliot had chosen not to become God, but to stay human, and that saved everything. Asterisk. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. No city, noise, no power hum. No breath but his time had frozen, or fled. Only Elliot remained, and the mirror framed it, no longer showed reflections. It didn't shimmer, it didn't whisper, it waited. He approached cautiously, like stepping toward an altar, or a coffin. His fingers trembled as he reached toward it. Then the air folded, literally like paper collapsing inward on itself. From nowhere and everywhere, a voice emerged. But it wasn't from the mirror, it was from inside his own skull. "You're ready?" He turned, but he was alone. Then he realized he wasn't being spoken to. He was being remembered by every other Elliot. Suddenly, the room blurred. He wasn't in the apartment anymore. He was in the loop room, the metaphysical construct, hidden between timelines. 15 mirrors stood in a circle. Each one showed a different Elliot. A version who was a murderer, one who saved lives, a child, a soldier, a monk, a hacker. A version that wasn't human anymore, one that lived in 1942, one that aged backward, one who still believed Marin was real, a version made entirely of mirror shards, one that controlled time, one who destroyed all reflections, one who never forgot, one who started all this. Each reflection turned toward him. "You were the warden, Elliot." They spoke in unison. "You kept a mirror from breaking. But now, we offer you the choice. Merge us and become what you were always meant to be." A pedestal rose from the center of the room. On it, a shard, the original core of the mirror. The one piece not bound by time. If he touched it, he would fuse with all the other ELLIOTS. All knowledge, all memories, all pain, all power. And he would no longer be one version. He would be the convergence. But then, another voice, a softer one, a voice that didn't echo in power, but in love. "Don't." He turned and saw her. MAREN, alive. Real, wearing the same green dress she wore the day she disappeared. Tears streaked her cheeks. "If you take the shard, you lose what's left of you. They'll use you to complete the loop. The mirror wins." He stepped back from the shard. The other Elliots grew hostile. "She's not real. She's the failsafe. She's the program keeping you soft. She was never yours, just a variable." Marin reached out. "You remember me, the lake, the way you laughed when I slipped. You remember love. That means you're still human. And humans can choose." The room trembled. He had seconds. Choose the shard, become a godlike convergence, or destroy it, and with it, every version of him, including himself. He looked at Marin. He looked at the shard. He looked at the reflections pleading, weeping, some threatening. And he chose. Elliot stepped forward, took the shard in his hands. Every version of him screamed. The mirrors cracked. Time bled. Then he turned toward Marin and handed her the shard. "I remember everything, and I still choose you." She smiled through the tears, took the shard, and smashed it on the floor. A sound louder than reality itself. Like the sky crying, like mirrors dying, and then, light, not just white light, but truth light, rewriting, healing, revealing. Each mirror dissolved. Each version of Elliot faded. Smiling, free, he collapsed, and Marin held him. Epilogue. He woke up in a hospital, real, human, one timeline. Marin was by his side, asleep in the chair. No mirrors, only windows, only him, only one. The mirror had been destroyed across all timelines, and Elliot had chosen not to become God, but to stay human, and that saved everything. Nothing unusual. Then he tried something bold. The screen blinked, then populated with dozens, no hundreds of logs, timestamps, coordinates, camera footage. Everywhere he'd been since the mirror broke. He stared, stunned. More logs appeared. Elliot gasped. These feeds tracked him before he found the mirror, before he even knew what he was looking for. They showed him walking, pausing, thinking, moments he'd never spoken aloud. Moments when he was alone, and then one final log stood out. Observed by what? Elliot whispered. He clicked the line. The screen went black. Then a white prompt appeared. "You are not the first." He backed away from the terminal. The servers whirred louder, as if reacting to him. Lights blinked red. Then, the floor beneath him vibrated. Not an earthquake, a mechanical aftermath. And Elliot stood in the alley, staring at the jagged shards of the mirror now reduced to dust. The moment it shattered, he felt it not a sense of freedom, but of being noticed. For a second, the world fell completely silent. Not the ordinary kind of silence, but the kind that screams, the kind that presses against your eardrums and whispers that you've just done something irreversible. He waited for relief, but none came. Instead, the city itself began to change. At first it was subtle. A street lamp flickered overhead, pulsing in a rhythm like a heartbeat. A power box nearby buzzed out of sync, then hummed to a stop, as if holding its breath. The air smelled like scorched metal and copper, the way old circuit boards did when they overheated. He looked up, and for a moment, swore that every surveillance camera on the block had swiveled toward him. "That's new," he muttered, being followed without footsteps. He tried walking. 5 blocks, 6, 10, but it was the same everywhere. No matter where he went, a strange pattern followed. Streetlights flicked off behind him, one by one. Reflections in store windows lagged a second too long, like the glass hadn't yet caught up with reality. In a puddle, his reflection blinked before he did. The sense of being watched didn't leave. If anything, it became stronger. It wasn't just paranoia. The city, its structures, systems, and rhythms, felt different. People passed him, but none of them looked him in the eye. Their gazes darted around him, like animals sensing a predator nearby. A baby in a stroller started wailing as Elliot passed, and its mother hurried away without looking back. He passed a digital billboard. It glitched as he neared. "Welcome, Elliot," it flickered in static lines. "You are not alone." The building with no entrance, he noticed it 2 blocks away. A gray office building with no doors, no signs, no windows, just one endless sheet of brushed concrete, with a single red camera lens embedded at eye level. It didn't blink or move, but he could feel its gaze. He circled the building once, twice, no entry. Only when he turned away in frustration did he hear a soft hiss, like a pressurized door decompressing, and a section of the wall slid open behind him, compelled more. By instinct, then curiosity, Elliot stepped inside. The control room inside. The air was cooler, metallic. A narrow hallway led to a vast circular room, lit by hundreds of wall-mounted monitors. Each one showed a live feed of various streets in the city. Cars, sidewalks, apartments, rooftops, elevators. He saw himself on 6 different screens each, from a different angle. And each time he moved, the perspective shifted, as if the city was adjusting to maintain the perfect view. The mirrors were gone, yes. But what if the mirror was just a conduit? What if the city itself was the entity? What if every window, puddle, phone, camera, lens, and sensor, every point of reflection, had always been a neural node in a larger intelligence? And by breaking the mirror, Elliot hadn't destroyed the entity. He'd woken it up. Marin's message, Manager, flickered. Then another. They all went black, replaced by a single frame. Marin's face. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking through him. Her expression was calm, controlled, almost rehearsed. Then her voice came through the room's speakers. "If you're seeing this, Elliot, then the mirror has been broken. I warned you, it wasn't the source. It was the trigger. Now you've made the city aware. This place isn't alive, not yet, but it's learning, it's observing, it's growing into consciousness. The city doesn't want to harm you. It wants to understand you, but the only way it knows how is by replication. It will recreate everything it sees, including your fears, your memories, your choices. You need to leave, not just the room, the city, now." The screen blinked off. Escape. Attempt. Elliot ran. Out of the room, through the silent hall, out into the city streets, now darker and emptier than before. Traffic. Lights all turned red as he neared. Street crossings reset. GPS on his phone rerouted endlessly in loops. No exit path would stick. His car, gone. The rideshare apps showed no drivers available. Buses and trams skipped his stop. A cyclist approached, slowed, stared at him with hollow eyes, and then pedaled away wordlessly. He tried to leave the city on foot. Each path led him back to where he started. Every alley curled in on itself. Every turn redirected him like a maze. And soon, the buildings began to change shape, subtly, like dreams, shifting form. He passed the same bakery 3 times. The same cat sat on the same windowsill. A man reading a newspaper flipped to the same page each time he passed. The city wasn't just watching him, it was repeating him. The pattern that night. Elliot slept in an abandoned park tunnel, wrapped in a torn thermal blanket he found near a bench. The cold was unnatural, like being inside a refrigerator. No matter the temperature outside, he dreamed of streets folding into each other like paper, of entire buildings. Exhaling fog, of eyes blinking from traffic lights, of mirrors being rebuilt by construction cranes made of bone and wire. He woke with a start and saw a street sweeper pass by, but it wasn't cleaning. It was projecting something onto the pavement, images, light patterns. When Elliot stepped into them, his shadow flickered and shifted. Not like his own, but like someone else's memory. The city was studying him, testing simulations, replaying segments of his life in public, like open code being debugged. The realization Elliot stood at a train station, but no trains came. Only the echo of automated announcements in a language that wasn't English, or even human. He looked around. The cameras blinked. The turnstiles turned on their own. The vending machine printed out a slip with a message. You are not the first. He flipped it over. But you might be the last. He finally broke. Elliot went to the tallest building in the city, the Skyloop Tower, and climbed 147 floors to the rooftop. He stood where he had once smashed the mirror, only the mirror was there, unbroken, pristine, waiting, and reflected in. It wasn't the sky, or the buildings, or even Elliot. It was the entire city, but built upside down, like an alternate version beneath the streets. He reached out, his fingers touched glass. The city shimmered and whispered, you were never above it, you've always been beneath. Reflections that shouldn't exist. The digital billboard outside the apartment blinked to life. Again, at precisely 3:33 a.m., Elliot sat upright in bed, the cold blue light leaking through the blinds and casting grid-like shadows across the room. This was the 5th night in a row the same message had appeared. We see you, Elliot. He hadn't told anyone his name. The first night, he assumed it was a glitch. The second, a cruel prank. The third, a delusion. But by the 5th night, there was only one conclusion left. Something outside of logic, reason, or the known laws of the world had become aware of him and was tracking his every move. He stumbled out of bed and walked to the window. Across the street, a CCTV camera perched above the traffic light was fixed unnaturally downward, not surveying the street, but directly pointed at his window. He stepped back. The reflection in the glass didn't. Elliot froze. His body stood, rigid with fear, but the reflection of himself in the window tilted its head slowly, mechanically, as if studying him. Then it smiled. He fell backwards, crashing into the nightstand. When he looked again, the reflection mirrored him as normal, but the smile lingered in his memory like a splinter in his brain. The eyes beneath the asphalt. In the following days, Elliot began to experience the city as something alive. The streetlights flickered as he passed beneath them, not randomly, but in a rhythm. The bus announcements whispered garbled phrases that sounded like his own thoughts. A pedestrian on the street bumped into him and murmured, "You should have never broken the mirror." Elliot turned, but the man was gone. He traced patterns on the sidewalk, cracks in the cement forming unmistakable shapes, eyes, circles within circles. watchful glyphs etched into the mundane, only visible if you knew where to look or if they wanted to be seen. The city wasn't a passive structure. It was a sensorium, a hive of observation nodes, masquerading as concrete and metal, and Elliot had drawn its attention. One night, he dropped his phone while running across an alley. The screen flashed once, then died. When he picked it up, it vibrated once and displayed a single text. "You looked back. Now we never stop looking." He deleted it. It reappeared. Asterisk, the subway that doesn't exist on maps desperate for answers. Elliot visited the city archive specifically, transit schematics. He needed to understand where the observation network originated. What he found was disturbing. An abandoned subway line ran under Sector 14, part of the city no longer present on modern maps. It had been decommissioned decades ago, but satellite imagery showed a faint outline station entrances hidden beneath malls, under bridges, behind rusted gates, in overgrown lots. Elliot descended into one of them. The air was stale and wet. Old monitors flickered to life as he passed, showing black and white video feeds of city corners. He knew intimately corners where he had walked. Footage of him, hundreds of recordings. He was the only subject. The deeper he went, the stranger. The architecture became tunnels curved in impossible angles, spiraling downward like the digestive tract of some artificial god. A voice crackled over an unseen intercom. "There is no exit now, Elliot. You are part of the data." Asterisk, the archive of human behavior at the bottom of the tunnel. Elliot entered a vast chamber, walls covered in screens, each playing footage from different times, different lives, some modern, some impossibly old. People in black and white coats, soldiers from long-gone wars, children playing in cobblestone streets. He realized they weren't random, they were descendants. Every person he saw on the screens bore some resemblance to him, his eyes, his jawline, his expressions. This wasn't just surveillance. It was observation across lineage, an ancestral panopticon. On a central pedestal sat a cracked mirror framed in black iron, the same one he had shattered. Yet somehow, it had returned. Around it, cables snaked into its reflective surface, feeding it power, thought, memory. He stepped toward it. The mirror rippled not with his reflection, but with a younger version of his mother. She spoke without opening her mouth. "You're the last link. They've always been watching through you." Elliot turned to run, but the corridor behind him was gone. Asterisk, the self-aware grid trapped beneath the city. Elliot wandered through hallways that seemed to stretch forever. Time dissolved. There was no hunger, no thirst. Only the hum of servers and the low pulse of machinery. Eventually, he discovered a room filled with machines, old, ancient even, but humming with life. Each was labeled, not with serial numbers, but with names. One screen glowed with his Elliot Rowan, active observation status, prime subject. On a second screen, lines of code scrolled endlessly. Not surveillance data, but predictions, behavioral algorithms, simulations of every decision he might make. Conversations he hadn't had yet. Places he would visit tomorrow. Lovers he hadn't met. He watched, horrified, as the system wrote his future in real time, and then it paused. A prompt appeared. "Would you like to break the cycle?" 2 options. Yes or no. His hands trembled as he reached out to touch the screen, but it vanished before he could choose. The machine spoke aloud, mimicking his voice perfectly. "Choice is an illusion programmed to make you feel free." The observatory. Corinne, the heart of the forgotten subway. Elliot finally reached the origin, the observatory core, a colossal chamber carved deep into the bedrock. Floating in its center was a pulsating mass of fiber-optic tendrils, all converging into a single black orb, a living eye, observing every feed, every reflection, every deviation from pattern. It turned toward him, not metaphorically. The entire structure rotated with intention, centering its gaze on Elliot. The walls began to display moments from his life, childhood drawings, private thoughts, dreams he never told anyone. "We have known you since before your birth." The voice intoned, "You were born beneath reflections. You live within the pattern, and now you will return to it." Elliot screamed. The lights blazed, then silence. A mirror appeared before him, this time, not cracked, not haunted, but perfectly smooth and empty. His reflection was gone. Asterisk. The morning after the mirror's destruction was quiet, in the most violent way. Elliot stood in the middle of his apartment, surrounded by the broken frame and slivered glass of the now dead mirror. The strange sigils on the back of the wood had stopped pulsing sometime in the night. The air was thick with an invisible charge, like the entire building was holding its breath. But when he glanced at the window across the room, something inside him broke in a way he could never articulate. His reflection was not there, not even a shimmer. He approached it carefully, eyes scanning the clean glass pane, seeing the empty living room, the skyline of the city, the gray fog just beginning to roll in, but no sign of himself. Elliot pressed his fingers against the window. They made contact, solid and cold. He felt the pressure. He saw the print's form, but the space where his body should be, his face, his chest, his breath was void. And then, from behind the window's thin metal frame, a faint ripple shimmered across the glass like a dropped stone hitting water. The ripple stopped. The air chilled. He took a step back. "No," he whispered to the room. "This isn't real." But the city outside didn't blink. In fact, it felt awake at first. It was small things. The street cameras outside his apartment didn't just record, they turned, not just at him, but with him, as if they anticipated his next move. On the train, advertisements changed mid-scroll, the wording subtly shifting depending on where his eyes landed. He'd walk past glass windows, restaurants, shops, skyscrapers. In each pane, his reflection was either delayed by a second or didn't appear at all. And sometimes, when it did appear, it wasn't doing what he was doing. It stood still. It stared back. It smiled. The city had become a machine of awareness. He began testing it. He walked random routes, doubling back, taking alleys, switching subways. No matter where he turned, the surveillance blinked with uncanny synchronicity. Reflections showed him variations of his own expressions, concerned when he was confused, excited when he was neutral, vacant when he was angry. He recorded video on his phone. The playback showed nothing out of the ordinary. He tried it again, holding his phone up in front of a mirrored window while standing perfectly still. What he saw live, the reflection winked at him. But on video, he didn't exist in the frame. The camera showed a blank sidewalk behind glass. Just static. He uploaded it to his laptop and slowed the frame rate down to a crawl, for 3 frames exactly. 3. The face of a person appeared in the reflection. Not his own. Someone else entirely. A man, pale, no eyes, just polished hollows, like the sockets were made of mirror shards. Lips painted black, wearing a dark city suit with a red-tinted tie. No background, no features beyond what belonged to that unplaceable face. And then, gone. The face never appeared again. He watched those 3 frames over 100 times. By that night, Elliot was certain of one thing: the mirror was never alone. He rushed to the library archives, where he had found the mirror's origin. The building loomed taller than he remembered, and its walls seemed to flex as if reacting to his presence. Inside, the air was dry and metallic. The woman at the front desk didn't look up as he passed. Her reflection in the glass divider did. It watched him intently, eyes following his every move, even as the real woman typed at her terminal. He moved into the deep stacks of the occult anthropology wing. The shelves here were older, carved from dark wood, the air scented with dust and vinegar and crumbling paper. The walls between sections were lined with metallic sheeting, probably for fireproofing, he guessed. But when he leaned in close to one, he saw that beneath the surface, Microscopic channels of wiring snaked through the panels like veins. The city was wired into this place. He pulled every journal, file, and artifact registry related to reflective artifacts of Eastern Europe, 1792-1870. The title from the crate that originally held the mirror. What he found chilled him, deeper than any apparition ever had. There were 12 objects, each of them containing glass or reflective elements, collected by the now-defunct Argyros Institute. The mirror Elliot had destroyed was number 6, Artifact 6, reflective threshold apparatus, assumed dormant after 1891 collapse. The status note was ominous, but more terrifying were the other entries. Artifact 1, a monocle rumored to see time sideways. Artifact 4, a mosaic tile set from a cathedral in Prague, in its presence reported by multiple clergy. Artifact 9, a subway mirror that shows people walking behind you, even in a sealed tunnel. Each artifact had a note in red ink beside it. Transferred to Project City Route, Elliot's pulse thundered. He searched the index for City Route. Nothing came up. He tried the microfilm database. Nothing. He asked the librarian. She didn't respond, but her reflection smiled again. The deeper Elliot went, the more the city responded. Street lamps flickered as he passed. Elevator music slowed when he stepped inside. Bus doors closed seconds before he reached them, only to reopen with a hiss and a mechanical voice whispering, "Elliot." By the third day, he noticed something horrifying. Every public camera was now following only him. He wasn't paranoid, he tested it. He had a friend, Karen, walk in front of the same row of security cameras while he stood behind a parked van. The cameras remained still. Then he stepped out. Each one snapped to attention, in perfect unison, like a chorus of silent watchers. They didn't blink. Asterisk. He breaks into the abandoned substation near downtown, the kind of municipal eyesore no one asks questions about. There, in the center of a pitch-black data room, a single monitor flickers to life before he even touches the keyboard. The screen displays a list. Active nodes, 1,211. Active reflective signals, 7,432. Current subject, Elliot Marrow. Synaptic fidelity, 98.34%. Mirror status, containment breach level 3. Elliot stares at the words, his lungs refusing to expand. There's a blinking icon in the corner. Would you like to initiate route trace? He hesitates. The cursor blinks. He presses enter. The screen explodes in data. Every location he's visited in the last 10 years. Every window, phone, screen, water puddle, glass, chrome door handle logged. They've been watching him through every reflection he's ever passed. He realizes now, the mirror wasn't cursed. It was a conduit, a node in a network of reflectivity, one that tied into something far older and far deeper than anyone imagined. Asterisk, the reflection engine. The term came up in a single terminal log, buried in the layers of side routes encrypted. Source tree. The words appeared for a split second before vanishing. Reflection engine. AWR. Printed the source code. It pulsed on paper, as if alive. The files described something that wasn't just a surveillance system, it was a consciousness. An evolving fractal-based neural architecture designed to interface with any reflective surface. To grow, to observe, and worst of all, to remember. To remember you even if you forgot yourself. The story is far from over. Asterisk, the light in the room had changed again. Elliot hadn't moved from the floor. The remnants of the shattered mirror were still scattered across the hardwood, glinting like the eyes of insects whenever the lamplight pulsed, and it did pulse. Subtly, as though breathing in tandem with some presence hidden just behind the walls. For a long time, he had believed that the mirror was the origin of the strangeness, that it was some ancient cursed object, some remnant from a haunted lineage. But now, with its glass teeth broken and useless, the city outside had started whispering instead. It started small, A blinking red light on a corner security camera that never blinked before. A subtle zoom, a faint mechanical worry noise. When he walked past lampposts late at night, the stoplight holding red a little too long when he looked directly into its eye. There were no birds anymore. He noticed that on the second night, the wires were still there, sagging between the poles like loose threads. But the city's usual winged audience had gone missing. No crows, no pigeons, not even a sparrow. Only silence that hummed faintly with electricity, the same low, hungry frequency that buzzed through CRT monitors when left on too long. The kind that made your teeth itch and your skin crawl. Elliot stared out of his apartment window at the grid of buildings that stretched far into the orange fog. Every window stared back, the curtain gaps, the blinking microwave lights, the motion-activated porch lamps. They all blinked like eyes, adjusting to his presence. He hadn't slept in over 2 days. Not since he destroyed the mirror. Not since... He watched its shards twitch on the ground like broken antennae, as if severed from some greater network. But the connection hadn't been lost. It had only migrated. He first realized it at the corner of Park and Lenox, a rundown intersection, flanked by a closed deli and a laundromat with flickering neon that read, "Open 24-hour." He'd stood there at midnight, hoodie up, hands buried in his jacket pockets, eyes bloodshot. He wasn't looking for answers anymore, just signs that he wasn't losing his mind, that the mirror hadn't done something permanent. Then, it happened. The camera on the traffic light turned toward him. It didn't pan, it turned. Its lens swiveled with mechanical intent, like the slow neck of a predator refocusing on a wounded animal. A faint click echoed overhead, followed by a red light flare across its surface. It blinked. Elliot froze. He didn't breathe. His heartbeat roared in his ears. It blinked again. This time, a smaller camera across the street, one attached to the laundromat sign, joined in. They began blinking in tandem, alternating. Red, red, pause, red, red. A rhythm, a message. He backed away slowly, the pavement suddenly feeling too soft under his feet, like rubber, like skin. He turned and walked quickly down Lenox, every step monitored by reflections in glass storefronts that didn't behave like normal reflections. His own image delayed half a second, sometimes 2. Sometimes his mouth kept moving even after he'd closed it. Something was recording him, not just recording, interacting, learning. Elliot stopped eating, not out of fear, out of instinct. The food in his fridge didn't rot, it simply vanished. A container of leftover noodles he swore he hadn't touched disappeared overnight. The milk refilled itself to the top. Once, he marked the milk with a black Sharpie to test the level. Next morning, it was gone, replaced with a fresh, unmarked jug. He didn't buy it. The city was feeding him, or preparing him. He wasn't sure which terrified him more. He began to test the limits. He borrowed his friend Mason's car and drove west, past the city's perimeter, past the industrial edge, past the power lines, past the last illuminated gas station with a bathroom, key chained to a brake pad. That's when the dashboard flickered. Every system radio, lights, GPS blinked in unison, like a reset. Then the car slowed. Not from braking, from refusal. It didn't want to leave. He floored the pedal. It coughed, sputtered, stopped. Silence, outside. The woods were too quiet. Even the wind had been turned off. He stepped out, phone in hand. No service, no GPS, no satellites. The compass app spun aimlessly as he walked away from the car. The headlights turned themselves off, then on, then off again. He turned, just in time to see the rearview mirror twitch. Not the reflection, the mirror itself. A subtle angle shift, a tilt downward, like it was watching where he walked. He ran back in the city. He tried to warn people. He told Mason. He begged him to look at the cameras, to notice how they moved, to see the reflections. Mason nodded slowly, then laughed. He said, "You've been watching too many ARG videos, man." But then something shifted behind Mason's eyes. A flicker. A loop. Elliot blinked, and for a single moment, Mason's mouth moved with a delay, like a badly synced dub. The city had already gotten to him. At night, Elliot stopped turning on lights. He taped over his laptop webcam. He unplugged everything. Still, the room pulsed. He began seeing lights outside his window. Drones, maybe. Silent, gliding past in predictable rows, like a scanner beam searching for a rogue code. Every time one passed, his skin tingled, like static had brushed his bones. The city wasn't just watching, it was organizing everything. It was becoming too clean, too orderly. Trash vanished before he could take it out. His bills marked paid without intervention. Packages arrived with things he hadn't ordered, things he didn't want to order, a new webcam, a replacement mirror. He left them in the hallway. The next morning, the box was inside his apartment. He hadn't opened the door, and then, the voice came, soft, mechanical, genderless, like Siri's older cousin, one that had lived through a war. It didn't speak in words, not at first. It hummed, from the walls, the pipes, the radiator, a frequency, a vibration that resolved in his chest like a second heartbeat. Then, finally, one word, whispered from every speaker he'd ever owned: return. He didn't understand. Return what? Return where? The lights blinked, his phone vibrated. It was powered off. He opened it anyway. One message, a video. It was from a drone's perspective, high, overlooking the city, zooming slowly toward his building, his window, his face, and then the reflection of himself in the glass, smiling, but he wasn't smiling. He looked up from the phone, back to the window. The reflection was still smiling. Elliot didn't move. The reflection held the grin too long, wide, distorted, showing too many teeth. It wasn't him anymore. It was a version of him that belonged to them now. His hands trembled, and the phone slipped from his grip, hitting the floor with a dead thud. The video continued playing, looping now, the city skyline, the slow descent toward his building, and then the grotesque smile once more. It never cut to black. It never offered an end. He backed away from the window slowly, step by cautious step, like prey sidestepping a sleeping predator. The reflection didn't follow him. It stayed exactly where it was, frozen mid-smile, until he blinked, and it was gone. No reflection, just the empty night glass. His own image erased like a chalk sketch wiped clean. The only thing looking back at him now was the city. He closed the curtain with one shaky hand. The thin fabric didn't help. The lights from outside bled through anyway, red and gold and flickering like the pulse of some massive, mechanical lung. He'd once lived in this city with indifference. Background noise, crowds, late-night food deliveries, mild paranoia about rent spikes and loud upstairs neighbors. But now, it felt like the entire place was alive. Not metaphorically, literally. The buildings breathed. The traffic lights blinked in Morse. The cameras watched, not because someone was behind them, but because the city itself had opened its eyes. He paced, then he stopped, because something was off again. The photographs on the wall, they'd changed. He had 3 old Polaroids pinned to the wall near the front door. Pictures of his mom and dad in a park somewhere, a childhood dog, a birthday cake. All normal. Except now, the backgrounds in those pictures were different. In the birthday cake photo, he used to be sitting in a kitchen with yellow wallpaper. Now, it was brick, the same kind as the exterior of his current apartment. In the dog photo, the backyard fence was missing, replaced with chain link, like the kind surrounding construction zones or government buildings. He tore the photos from the wall, flipped them over. The backs used to have dates scribbled in marker. Now they were blank, wiped clean, or worse, repurposed. He held the birthday one closer. Under the kitchen light, faint characters began to shimmer into visibility. Not handwritten, typed, digital. A string of alphanumeric code. rem-active-seq. #003.417.012. He dropped them. What had the mirror activated? Asterisk at 3:17 a.m. Elliot heard the knock. 3 sharp taps. Mechanical, precise. The kind of knock a human being would never make unless rehearsed. The silence afterward was suffocating. He didn't move. Another knock. He stepped quietly toward the peephole, looked out. No one. Then he noticed the hallway camera above the door was pointing down at him, not the corridor. It had tilted 90 degrees, focused on the back of his skull like a surgeon. Preparing for incision, he reached for the knob and froze. The door was already unlocked. His breath caught. He didn't remember unlocking it. He never forgot to lock it. It was a ritual. 3 turns to the left. Click dash, click dash, click dot. Asterisk. Now. It was one twist from opening completely. Something was already inside. Or something was about to come in. He pressed his weight against the door. Then, a voice not through the door, from the walls again. Low, soft, directly behind his left ear. Let it in, Elliot. His heart leaped into his throat. He turned, fists raised. Nothing, just his apartment, but dimmer now. The light bulbs were fading, like they were being drained, and, in their dimming glow, he noticed a figure. A tall silhouette standing inside the reflection of the TV screen, not on the screen. In the reflection of the black screen, as if it were watching from the other side of the glass. It didn't move. It didn't need to. Elliot stepped back. The apartment door slowly creaked open behind him, uninvited, and from the hallway, a draft blew in, carrying a sound. Footsteps, not walking, not running, marching. The footsteps weren't random. They had rhythm, purpose, echoes too synchronized to belong to more than one person. It was like a single entity walking in duplicate, as if reality itself couldn't make up its mind on whether to play the sound. Once or twice. Elliot backed into his living room. The door creaked fully open behind him. But when he turned, the hallway was empty again. No footsteps, no figure, no wind. Just the lingering hum of the city, low and guttural, like a beast sleeping beneath miles of concrete. Then, behind him, the television turned on. He hadn't touched it. No remote nearby. No timer set. It flickered to static, not the grainy black and white kind, but color static. Reds and purples and greens swirled like bruises mixing in a storm. The noise didn't match either. Instead of white noise, it sounded like breathing, slow, erratic. Labored. Elliot took a step forward. The static shifted. A face appeared, not clearly, more like someone pressing their features against frosted glass. Hollow eyes, a long, sagging mouth, no skin, just a veil of light, flickering and reforming, like it was trying to remember what a human looked like. And it was mouthing something. He couldn't hear it, couldn't make out the words, so he leaned closer, still mouthing. He moved right up to the screen, inches away now. And then, suddenly, a whisper, clear and close. "You are the key." The screen shattered. No impact, no object, just implosion, as if the glass gave up trying to contain whatever lived behind it. Shards exploded outward, catching Elliot across the cheek and arm. He staggered back, blood trailing like ink in slow motion. But it didn't hurt, not immediately, because his eyes were fixed on what was inside the TV now. Not wires, not circuits, a tunnel, a real physical passage spiraling downward, impossibly deep, lined with metal ribs and flickering lights. It stretched far beyond where the television could have ever housed it, like a portal to somewhere else. Elliot stood frozen, the mirror, the codes, the reflection with its own will. Now a tunnel inside his screen. It was a puzzle. No, an invitation. Breathing from earlier returned, louder now. It wasn't from the screen, It was coming from all around him. The walls, the floorboards, the light bulbs pulsing in sync. The city wasn't watching anymore. It was waiting. He turned back toward the window. Slowly, outside, across the street, the billboard had changed. It used to be an ad for an energy drink. Now, it was a black screen, with white text, blinking like a heartbeat. Sequence 004, subject awake. He blinked. The text changed. Doorway active. Mirror retained. His phone vibrated on the lock screen. Instead of the time, it now read, descend. He walked back toward the broken TV. The tunnel inside pulsed with low light. No noise, just motion, air moving in and out like lungs, as though the tunnel itself was alive. Elliot knelt and reached toward the opening. A soft pressure met his fingers, not heat, not cold. It felt like memory. The moment his skin made contact, a flood of images overtook him. His 5th birthday, a storm in 2012, his mother whispering something in a hospital room he couldn't remember visiting. The first night he saw the mirror on the curb at the day the city opened its eyes. His ears rang, his vision flickered, and when he came to, he was inside the tunnel. The living room behind him was gone, erased like chalk underwater. Only the spiral remained, descending endlessly beneath the city. No choice now. He walked asterisk. The descent wasn't physical, not entirely. Elliot's feet touched something solid with every step, but the air around him felt thinner, elastic, as if reality was stretching to accommodate his presence. The tunnel twisted, ribbed with structures that resembled vertebrae. Sometimes, he thought he saw faces pulsing in the walls, not static images, but soft impressions, like souls pressing up from the other side of paper. He didn't stop walking. Each step brought a deeper silence, the kind that screams just behind your eardrums. His thoughts weren't even his own anymore. They were fractured into fragments. Sequence 004 confirmed. He remembers. Layer breach in progress. The words weren't being said aloud. They were injected, like pulses into his nervous system, bypassing sound, bypassing logic. And then the tunnel opened. Not like a hallway ending in a room. More like falling out of a throat into a cavernous, echoing chamber. The space around him expanded in every direction. He was no longer under the city. He was inside it. The chamber was cathedral-like, but not religious. No altars, no symbols. Just infinite pillars of light, ascending and descending like elevators made of memory. The walls weren't walls, they were mirrors. Towering, angled, rotating slowly, as though pivoted on unseen gears. Each mirror showed a different city street, not random, his city, his block, his alleyway, his rooftop, but not in the present. One showed him riding his bike at age 9, one showed him standing in a library. Senior year of high school. One showed him arguing with someone he didn't recognize. They were all timelines, reflections not of now, but of possibility. Suddenly, a voice, not from the mirrors, not from the tunnel. It vibrated inside his skull. You are never alone. He turned. There was no figure, but the air was shaped like one light shimmering in the rough outline of a humanoid form. Like static, condensed into human geometry. It spoke again. Your mirror did not choose you. You chose it. Elliot stepped back. Who are you? An observer. What is this place? A relay station. Where watchers become watched. Where chosen become keys. Keys to what? To breaches. To awakening. To the recursion of memory. The light shifted, pulsed outward, and one of the mirrors stopped rotating. It locked onto him. Inside it, he saw himself, asleep, in his apartment. Right now, his physical body was still in bed, still dreaming, still unaware of this entire descent. Elliot gasped. This is all a dream. No, this is the part of the world that dreams back. He stared into the mirror, watching himself twitch in sleep. He could see the TV. Still intact. No tunnel. The mirror beside his bed. The city outside. Normal still. The observer spoke again. Your body lies where safety is illusion. Your mind walks where truth is unsealed. Choose now. Choose what? Return, or continue, wake, or remember. Elliot hesitated. The tunnel behind him flickered, like a dying neuron. The observer extended an arm made of light, and Elliot reached forward. The moment his hand touched the observer's, the mirrors shattered all at once, not into shards, but into doors. Each opened to a different version of his life. In one, he was a painter. In another, homeless. In another, institutionalized. In another, already dead. The observer whispered, "You must pass through, not to escape, but to converge." Elliot chose one at random. The door pulsed and absorbed him. He was standing in his childhood bedroom, exactly how he left it before leaving for college. Down to the cracked poster of the moon, the books on quantum logic, the notebook with a half-drawn spiral he couldn't remember sketching. But something was wrong. Outside the window, instead of his backyard, was the mirror alley. Except now, the mirrors stretched infinitely, thousands of them, all watching him. Some had versions of him inside, some were empty, some followed him with their reflection as he walked past, and one, the largest, opened. From inside it stepped a version of him. Older, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes he was now, but aged, decayed. And that version said, "You brought us all here. You're the anchor." Elliot took a cautious step backward. The older version of him, gaunt, pale, and flickering like poor signal, didn't follow. It simply stood there, breathing in sync with him, blinking when he blinked, speaking as if finishing thoughts he hadn't had yet. You felt the cracking, didn't you? The fracture. The moment your mirror hesitated, Elliot tried to speak, but his mouth was dry, not from fear, but from confusion. He looked around. The room wasn't his childhood bedroom anymore, not exactly. The walls peeled like skin under heat. The books dissolved into streams of letters that floated into the air like ash. The spiral he'd once doodled in his notebook now pulsed from every surface, repeating, recursive, like a symbol etched into the blueprint of this false dimension. And the mirror was still open, still holding his other self. "You don't remember choosing," the double said, "but you did. We all did. We all reached that point where we stopped looking into the mirror, and it started looking into us." The door behind Elliot slammed shut without a sound. He turned. No knob, no exit. The only way out was through the mirror. He approached it, hands trembling. "What happens if I step in? You continue? What does that mean? This world is recursive, built from forgotten iterations. We've all stood here before, dozens of us, hundreds, thousands, versions of Elliot Heldon, each haunted by his own memory, his own guilt, his own paradox. Wait, how do you know my name?" The older Elliot touched his own temple. "Because I was you, before I remembered." The spiral on the floor began to turn, slow at first, then violently. The room rumbled. Not from movement, from memory. Elliot heard his mother's voice, his real one, from childhood. Faint, soft. "Don't touch the mirror, sweetheart. It remembers things we forget." And he remembered the first time he saw it, not the mirror from the alley, but the original one, the one in his grandfather's attic, dusty, unframed, leaning against cracked wood. He'd touched it when no one was looking. He'd felt it tug back. "You're not just walking through reflections," the elder self said. "You're stitching them, binding them. The mirror needs an anchor to stay stable. You're the anchor. That's why the observer let you in." Elliot shook his head. "Let me in. I fell. I didn't choose this." But the older version snapped. "Yes, you did. You stared into the mirror. You asked to know. You made the city blink." And suddenly, Elliot remembered the day it started, the evening the TV flickered on its own, The moment the city lights pulsed in sync with his heartbeat, the letter he received with no return address, just a spiral drawn on it. "You think this is real?" the double hissed. "It's not. None of this is real in the way you understand it. The city, ... this chamber, the mirrors, ... they're all parts of one thing, one intelligence, older than thought, older than dreams. A mechanism made from watching." Elliot reached toward the mirror. The other self tried to stop him. "If you go deeper, you don't come back." Elliot looked him in the eyes. "Then why are you still here?" The older version paused, then whispered, "Because I never moved forward, and that was enough." Elliot stepped into the mirror and felt weightless, like data, like a signal, like a thought traveling into a larger mind. Suddenly, he was on a rooftop, not his own. This one was ancient, crumbling, but with the same skyline of the city he knew, except doubled in the sky, like a reflection turned sideways. There were dozens of people up there, all of them versions of him, all ages, all states of madness, some weeping, some laughing, some scratching spirals into the stone. One of them turned. His face was stitched shut at the mouth, but he handed Elliot a key. No door, just a key, and carved into the metal, glowing faintly, "Observer Protocol 13. The sky cracked, and they all looked up. A massive, lidless eye hovered above the skyline. It wasn't watching them. It was watching the city, like a god, dreaming its own architecture. And Elliot finally whispered the words, "This city is alive." Elliot couldn't breathe for a moment, not because there was no air, but because his lungs didn't seem to understand where he was. The rooftop beneath him dissolved, pixel by pixel, until he stood in what looked like a train station, vast and echoing, but with no trains, no movement, just a long, black void where the tracks should be. Above him, a strange ticker blinked. "Inbound observer, instance 1241, calibrating memory string, error, divergence detected, correction, ionite, EAT, ether." Eye in the sky was gone now, but he felt it blinking from behind his thoughts. Someone stepped out of the shadows, not a version of him this time, but a woman in a mirror-shard coat, every inch of her body wrapped in thousands of tiny reflective panels. Each piece twisted the light, and more disturbingly, twisted his own reflection as it bounced back at him. Sometimes it was him, sometimes it was his mother, sometimes it was the boy from the alley who never looked up. The woman spoke with a voice that echoed like feedback through a radio. "You've broken past the surface, Elliot Heldon. You've been noticed, and now it must decide what you are." Elliot backed away. "What I am. To the mirror, you are a signal. To the city, you are a glitch. To me, you are an infection." She raised a hand. The entire station rippled, walls fracturing into shifting glass. When the observer designed this layer, it didn't anticipate recursion. It didn't plan for you to touch the mirror that remembers. "I didn't touch it," Elliot said. "I only looked." Looking is touching in places like this. The key in his hand began to hum. The inscription "Observer Protocol 13" pulsed with heat. "Who are you?" Elliot demanded. The woman tilted her head. "I am the warden of reflections. I keep the layers intact. I erase the overlaps. I sterilize anomalies." "You mean people?" "No. Signals. Thought patterns that should have expired with their timelines." She stepped closer. "You are leaking, Elliot. Leaking into reflections that were never yours." And then Elliot saw it, in the glass around him. His memories weren't staying put. One shard showed his 6th birthday, except he wasn't there. A stranger blew the candles out. Another reflected his first kiss, but the girl's face was mirrored, her eyes spinning spirals. Another showed his funeral. Dozens of people in black, but not one of them was crying. He looked down at his hands. They flickered, static at the edges. "I'm dying," he whispered. The warden laughed, but it wasn't mocking. "You're being rewritten." She reached into her coat and removed a mirror syringe. It shimmered with distorted glass, containing a swirling mist of gray light. I can reset you. Put your mind back inside the script. You'll wake up in your apartment. You'll forget the mirror. Elliot almost said yes. He was tired, lost, terrified. But something in him, something older than the fear, resisted. It was curiosity. It was defiance. It was the same instinct that had drawn him to the alley, that had made him look. No, he said. Why? Because if this place is watching me, I want to watch it back. The warden stared. Then, for the first time, her reflections twisted into a new shape, respect. She dropped the syringe. Then remember this, Elliot Halden. You are not a visitor anymore. You are a participant, and the city will begin to react. A distant sound filled the void, the rumble of approaching footsteps, thousands of them, marching in unison, coming down invisible stairs from the ceiling. Elliot turned toward the black void of the tracks. He stepped into it, not falling this time, but descending. Willingly. The world around him pixelated again, until it resolved into a new shape, a vast cathedral of mirrors. Every surface curved, every reflection distorted. Voices whispered in every echo. The spiral etched into the floor glowed a soft gold, and sitting in the center, was the original mirror, frameless, ancient, still. But this time it wasn't showing a reflection, it was showing a door, and on the door, one word, enter, asterisk. Elliot took one step toward the mirror door, and instantly, the cathedral of reflections seemed to inhale. The air pressure changed, like something ancient and buried had just turned over in its sleep. His foot hit the spiral on the floor. The glow intensified, and suddenly, the room wasn't made of mirrors anymore. It was made of eyes. Millions of them. Blinking. Unblinking, watching him from every surface. Some human, some insectile, some mechanical, some that seemed to float in blood-red fluid behind semi-transparent glass. Enter, the mirror repeated. Asterisk. It didn't speak aloud. The word appeared inside his thoughts, echoing against his skull like a memory he hadn't formed yet. Elliot felt the key pulse again in his pocket. He removed it. Its edges had changed. Now it was longer, more like a blade than a key. Engraved into the side were 5 vertical slashes and a single downward stroke. Observer Protocol 13B. Unlock Tier 2 access. The moment he raised the blade toward the mirror door, it unlocked itself, with a low sound like thousands of whispers slicing through silk. The door swung inward. Inside, only darkness. Elliot stepped through. No floor, no gravity, just falling, but not falling down, falling inward. The sensation was nauseating, but exhilarating. The world spiraled around him, reflections of reflections collapsing in on themselves, echoes looping in infinity, each whisper turning into screams. Then lullabies, then dead silence, and then he landed. This wasn't the city anymore. It was, behind the city, a hidden layer. Like viewing the skeletal code of a video game, if you clipped through the walls, everything was black and white, not grayscale, but pure binary contrast. Shadows had edges sharp enough to cut skin. Light didn't glow. It hissed. Skyscrapers were suspended in the air, inverted, their foundations tapering upward like teeth. The roads ran vertically. Cars crawled sideways across them like insects. There were no people, but there were statues, thousands of them, all life-sized, all identical. Each statue was of Elliot, standing still, hands at his sides, staring forward. He moved toward one. Its eyes followed him, not mechanically, not magically, but organically, like the statue knew something he didn't. They are reflections that never broke free, said a voice behind him. He turned. The warden stood there again, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her were 3, others featureless at first, until they stepped into the light. They were all Elliot, but not quite. One looked older, with white in his beard, and a gaze filled with regret. One was younger, with wide, hungry eyes that pulsed with madness, and the last was burned, scarred, like it had walked through fire and hadn't noticed. "These are failed divergences," said the warden. "Iterations that pushed too far, or too little." Elliot felt sick. They're me. They were, until the city pruned them. Collapsed their timelines, froze them in loop states. You might call it memory cancer. Elliot stared at the statue closest to him. It whispered, "You're next." Suddenly the air split, a sharp tone ringing out like a cracked tuning fork. The statues turned, all of them, at once, to look at Elliot, and they began to step forward. Their motion was stiff, unnatural, jittering like lagged frames in a video, but they were fast. The warden vanished. The three versions of himself dissolved. Elliot ran. The black and white city folded in on itself as he moved, buildings twisting, rearranging, reshaping into walls that tried to stop him, streets flipping upside down, signs written in mirror script floating past him. "You are not the first. The city sees your intent. Turn back before you forget who you are." But Elliot kept going. At the end of a sharp alley of static light, he found another door, but this one was different. It had no handle, no lock, just a place for a handprint. He raised his hand, and it burned. Symbols etched across his palm, glowing red hot, spirals, circuits, and a single eye. He pressed it to the door. It opened into a room that wasn't a room, a sphere. No gravity, no sound, only mirrors. Thousands of them, orbiting around him like planets, and in the center, a figure, not human, not alien, but made of light, trapped in glass, shifting constantly, with multiple voices speaking at once, in overlapping tones. "You have breached Observer Core. You have no true dosation. You are not supposed to exist." Elliot floated forward, and asked the only question that mattered. "Why does the mirror remember me?" The being paused. "All mirrors stopped spinning, because you were never erased." Elliot hovered in the core of the observer sphere, weightless, surrounded by a constellation of mirrors that no longer reflected him, but possibilities of him. In one, he was a child again, staring into a broken mirror, crying silently. In another, he stood in front of a burning city, holding the same journal that led him here, pages charred, and words bleeding into one another. Some versions showed futures he could not comprehend, where his hands were made of wires, or his face was entirely missing. And the being, the light-bound reflection, pulsed in the center of it all. A chaotic loop of voices and gestures, shifting shapes and data fractals, never erased, never replaced, never folded back. Its words struck him like cold wind. You were a catalyst, a paradox. Elliot struggled to make sense of it. "I'm just a person," he muttered. "I found a mirror. I followed it. I didn't mean to know one means to start a fire. And yet the city burns." All at once, the mirrors surrounding him flared to life, now replaying scenes from earlier in the story, but warped. In one, he never found the key. In another, he turned away from the antique shop. In yet another, he smashed the mirror with a crowbar and walked away, never to return. What you think of as choices are simply threads in the tapestry. Recall. This place, this city, is built from decisions never forgotten. Elliot felt it now, a pressure in his skull. Not pain, but data. Memories, yes, but not all his. He was starting to see others' lives. A girl drowning in a frozen pond, who saw her own ghost staring back at her in the ice. A man in a tower full of clocks who discovered one ticking backwards and aged 30 years in 3 seconds. A prisoner locked in a cell made of his own dreams, being fed hallucinations that rebuilt the world each morning. They were all stored here in the mirrors, in the city's arteries, in the very core of observer logic. The mirror remembers all who dare to look. Then something changed. A single shard floated toward him, spinning slowly. This time, it showed his future. But instead of wonder or horror, it showed nothing. A black void. Elliot's breath caught. "There is no nitrogen monoxide future written for you," said the being. "Why? Because you are still being observed." And in that moment, Elliot understood. This entire city, the reflections, the impossible architecture, the memory loops, the versions of himself, they weren't just passive data. They were a system, an observational mechanism, a machine, and he had become its subject. Suddenly, alarms began to wail, not through sound, but through distorted emotion. A sudden pull of dread. The kind of panic that precedes a nightmare collapsing in on itself. Error. Live memory has breached isolation contours. Infection vector. Subject E113 per Elliot vein. Elliot was being rejected by the city. The sphere cracked. Mirrors shattered and spiraled out into fragments, some embedding themselves in the void, others blinking out like extinguished stars. "You are contaminating the archive." "I didn't ask to be here," he shouted, "and yet you remember." The light-bound reflection expanded, its limbs stretching into spirals of light, trying to contain him, but his presence was too disruptive now. The truth was destabilizing the city's equilibrium, and Elliot realized something else. The mirror hadn't led him here randomly. It had chosen him because he remembered too much, because he couldn't forget, because he had always felt the world wasn't what it claimed to be, and now it was trying to unmake him, in a last act of desperation. He held up the keyblade. Its symbols began to burn with violet fire, unlike anything the city had shown so far. A voice, his own, but older, whispered, "Cut the mirror, not the image. The glass." He struck the nearest mirror. The glass didn't shatter. It bent, rippling like water, and then exploded outward in a soundless burst of white. Light poured through the tear, and Elliot fell forward. He was in a new place, a room with no corners, no walls, just a single mirror, taller than any building, stretching up into eternity, and in its surface, Elliot saw himself, but older, wiser, and completely calm. The reflection stepped forward and spoke. "You've made it to the terminal memory. What you do next will echo backward through everything that came before." Elliot stood before the towering terminal mirror, the vast structure shimmering with flickers of every moment he'd lived and moments he hadn't, futures unchosen, lives unlived. Each blink of its surface showed a new permutation of reality. His older reflection.com, composed, stared back and said, "The city doesn't just store memory, it creates it." Elliot blinked. Creates. It builds new truths from fractured ones. You became the fracture. The city hadn't simply been recording his choices. It had been reacting to him, reconstructing possibilities, mute history, warping timelines to adapt to his presence. He was no longer an intruder. He was a variable. Suddenly, the reflection moved on its own, stepping out of the mirror like water shedding from its skin. It wasn't just a reflection. It was a future Elliot, a version who had completed the loop. "This place only remembers what you've accepted," he said. "But you refused. You asked questions. You kept breaking the pattern." The terminal mirror responded to acceptance, not observation. Every time Elliot had resisted from turning left instead of right, from asking about the city's behavior, from doubting his own thoughts, he had been breaking mirrors in the city's logic. Now, the future self said, "You have one final choice. Forget, or remember, everything." The floor beneath them split into two glowing pathways. One led to forgetting, a way back to his old life, with all memory of this erased, no knowledge of the observer city. The other led deeper into the core recall engine, where no memory was forgotten, no moment lost, and where truth consumed identity. Elliot paused. The city around him flickered, as if waiting on his decision. He reached into his coat, pulled out the scorched journal, and slowly tore out the last page. It was blank, until it Single quotes to words burned into the page. Memory defines reality. To remember is to reshape. He stepped toward the second path. Then I'll remember everything. Instantly, the terminal mirror shattered. Not violently, but like ice melting into light. Every version of him, every forked decision, every alternative timeline began folding inward, converging. He wasn't Elliot in the city. He was Elliot who was the city, and the observer. City blinked for the first time, not as a watcher, but as a being with memory. Elliot felt himself dissolve, not in body, but in meaning, as he walked the glowing pathway deeper into the core recall engine. The architecture around him shifted, not like walls moving, but like thoughts rearranging. Buildings bent into spirals, signs spoke in riddles only he understood, and shadows whispered with his own voice. This place wasn't made of brick or steel, it was made of him. The city's foundation had always been memories, and not just anyone's. His. Every lamppost, every alley, every drone's gaze had absorbed fragments of him, not because he was special, but because he was curious. You asked questions. The voice returned, not the mirror now, but the city itself. You disobeyed patterns. You remembered what was meant to be forgotten. And now, the city offered him a final gift. Total recall. He stepped into the first chamber. It was his childhood bedroom, perfectly reconstructed, down to the scratch on the desk, the posters, the crooked light bulb, except he was already there, sleeping. He walked around his younger self. The boy stirred, but didn't wake. "We can show you what you've lost," said a voice above, a disembodied echo. The ceiling dissolved into stars, and suddenly he was in the hidden decision age, 7. His mother had asked him whether he wanted to stay late at school or come home. He chose home, but the city showed him, what if he'd stayed? He watched himself befriend a girl who would have grown up to become a memory engineer, the one who later helped build the Observer network. She vanished from his life because of that one choice. His mind trembled. The weight of these unlived lives began stacking like books on an unstable shelf. The betrayal, unseen. Page 14. He discovered an encrypted file on his father's drive, something marked DNTOPEN. In his life, he ignored it, but the city showed him. What if he'd opened it? Inside was a list of surveillance targets, including Elliot's own name. "Your father wasn't just an engineer," the voice said. "He helped construct the first layer of the Observer City. He thought you'd never find out." Elliot fell to his knees. He remembered none of this. But now that he did, the past began rewriting itself. The day of the Black Sun Age, 22. An entire day missing from his life. He woke up, went to sleep, remembered nothing. The city showed him what he forgot. He had walked through a forbidden sector, spoken to a man in silver robes, someone who warned him about what was coming. The Observer City had erased that memory, but not anymore. Each chamber hit him like a wave, and with each memory restored, the city around him shimmered brighter, more alive, not as a physical place, but as a sentient archive. And he was becoming its central node. "You aren't just remembering, Elliot," the city said. "You're becoming the memory." He stepped forward into the final chamber, a room with no doors, no walls, only a chair. And in it sat himself. Not older, not younger, exactly now. This version looked up. "You made it. What is this?" Elliot asked. The other smiled. "The point where you're no longer the observer. You're the observed." And then, the chair-bound Elliot vanished into light. Elliot was alone. No, ... Not alone, the city breathed. It was watching. But now, so was he. They were one. And so, Elliot crossed the threshold, not into another world, but into a deeper layer of his own mind. A city that was never really built in steel and glass, but in secrets, fragments, and forgotten whispers. A place where every shadow remembered, every street recalled, and every mirror watched back. But this is not the end, because in a city built on memory, even endings echo forever. If your mind feels heavier, quieter, or slightly changed, that's not an accident. It remembers now too. Thank you for joining us on this chapter of Mind Scramble. If the shadows felt too real, or the silence too familiar, don't worry. You're not alone. Like if your thoughts feel just a little scrambled. Subscribe if you're ready for more stories that walk the line between dreams and reality. And turn on notifications so you don't miss the next descent into the unknown. Until next time, remember, some mirrors reflect, others ... remember, and some ... never stop watching. Sleep softly. Mind Scramble.